The gold envelope is torn open, and the Master of Ceremonies speaks.
The award for exceptional and outstanding achievement, for making an unparalleled contribution, for being indisputably the greatest of all time, goes to...
A pause. Then you hear your name, and on its heels, an eruption of applause. You get up from your table and head to the stage, people eagerly jostling each other to pat you on the back as you pass by. You step up in front of the crowd into a storm of flashbulbs, and the Master of Ceremonies welcomes you warmly. And the Master of Ceremonies is you. Not only this, but the multitudes cheering around the auditorium are you too. And the TV crew capturing the ceremony are you. And they are broadcasting live across the globe to a home audience of millions who are all also you. Even the hordes of fans outside, waiting for hours in the rain with their autographed books and their selfie sticks for just one glimpse of their idol, are you. As Master of Ceremonies, you present yourself with your award. You survey the crowd and meet the gaze of your adoring lovers, all of whom are seated right at the front. Like you, they are overcome with emotion, and they are you too. You move to the lectern to begin your acceptance speech. A hush of anticipation falls. You speak through tears of joy, a mere few words, but perfect words, perfectly suited to this perfect moment. Me. It's all about me. The standing ovation that follows could not be more heartfelt. It really is all about you. Rightly, the world recognises just how special you are, and you accept the acclaim you so very richly deserve. That feeling, right there, in that precise moment, is one of colossal and unequivocal victory. Of a definitive triumphant culmination, of an unshakable conviction in your own exceptional preeminence. It represents a love of self so deep, so profound, so naive and self-sufficient that it does not even have any conception of anything outside of itself. And that supreme moment of joy in apotheosis is frozen eternally. Only that moment exists. That moment is existence itself. Do you find this vignette of unrestrained self-adoration distasteful? Embarrassing even? What kind of spoilt, self-entitled arrogance is this? Who is this insufferable individual? Allow me to introduce you to the cosmic Pied Piper and shameless anti-god, Dionysus.
What does not kill me makes me stronger.
This is the Will to Joy podcast. Will to Joy is a resource for personal growth and transcendence based on the extraordinary teachings of Friedrich Nietzsche.
Welcome, folks, to the Will to Joy podcast. I'm hoping you are well. I'm not too bad myself. A bit of news from my end. As I've mentioned before, I've been writing a book on this material for the past 7 years. And at the outset, I never envisaged that Nietzschean philosophy could be so vast. The book, accordingly, is huge, and though it would doubtless be streamlined by the editing process, it has long become clear to me that this is more than one book. So a few months back, I wrote a chapter on beauty, sexual attraction and social status. That chapter ended up being 54,000 words long, and that's only a rough draft. So 54,000 words for a chapter is gargantuan. And in a book with 10 chapters, you're talking about 500,000 words potentially, which is insane. That's longer than the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Think of it as 5 or 6 volumes of a standard trade paperback. Now, obviously, my text can and should be distilled down considerably in the editing process, but even so, it's a bigger project than a single book. So I'm taking the chapter on sex, relationships and status and working that up into its own book. Right now, I'm pulling together the proposal and I'll finally be submitting something to a bunch of publishers in the next few weeks, I hope. Will they go for it? Who knows? But I know for sure that there's no book like this out there, at least not that I could find. It will, of course, be entirely practical, not theoretical. A book that's an aid to enhancing and elevating life. As I've mentioned before, Nietzsche writes, quote, "The only critique of a philosophy that is possible and that proves something, namely trying to see whether one can live in accordance with it, has never been taught at universities. All that's ever been taught is a critique of words by means of other words," unquote. And that's from Untimely Meditations 3:8. Speaking of universities and academic philosophy generally, I'll be attending the International Friedrich Nietzsche Society Conference in Belfast in September of this year. Academic philosophy is a little outside the purview of this project, although I do stay abreast of it for obvious reasons. But if any of you are attending, it will be a chance to say hi. So, do feel free to message the show if you're going. To this week's topic. Of late, we've been discussing the status of the body in Nietzsche's philosophy, and last week we talked about the soul. Well, we made an attempt to isolate and identify this mysterious entity by uncovering its characteristics and functions. If you followed the meditation, you will have seen that, in my examination at least, the soul has no identifiable characteristics or functions. Every characteristic or function or physical feature or personality trait that you possess can instead be adequately accounted for by your body in that tripartite division which I put forward as my interpretation of Nietzsche's physiopsychology. So that's your anatomy, your innate characteristics that you're born with, and your acquired characteristics acquired from your body's interactions with its environment during the course of your life. Now, you may have noticed that even this division into 3 is arbitrary. I mean, can you really separate your anatomy from your innate characteristics? Doesn't really make sense. And can you separate your anatomy and its innate characteristics from the interactions with the environment that produce acquired characteristics? Of course not. They're all of a piece. Consider that every part of your being is constructed from elements in your environment. Not just the physical substance of your body, but everything you are capable of thinking or doing. Your instincts, feelings and impulses are an inheritance from the countless generations of ancestors via your parents. Your language, culture and habits come from outside, from your community, which is a fact of the environment. There is nothing of you, in fact, that is not drawn from the wider world, the empirical world. And, in principle, all of it can be traced and explained. There's no need for supernatural souls incarnating into the material world from some sort of astral plane to explain anything. As was demonstrated, I hope, if the soul is a thing without any attributes or qualities, it isn't a thing. It's a nothing. Let that fiction go, so says Nietzsche. But why should we? What harm does belief in souls do? Well, that's what we'll be discussing this week, the history of the denigration of the body. particularly in the West under the influence of Christianity. What history tells us is that the elevation of the soul has been accompanied by a war on the body. From antiquity, the metaphysical soul has been a ubiquitous and pivotal religious idea, not only in the Abrahamic traditions of the West, Judaism, Christianity and Islam, but also in Hinduism in the East. In fact, the world over, religions have postulated some kind of transcendental soul or spirit inhering in human beings. The ancient Egyptians believed in an elaborate multitude of souls in every individual, each soul serving a different function. Plato, not entirely unlike our old friend Descartes, held that the soul, psyche in Greek, from which we get the word psychology, the soul was more real than the body because it was immortal, an eternal form rather than an object of perishable matter like the body. The universality of what Nietzsche calls the soul fiction is a testament to the seductive nature of the delusion. As we've already observed, your conscious mind is ever present to you, and so you cannot easily imagine it ceasing to exist. Why then should it not be immortal? Your mind seems to be able to travel beyond the confines of your body in dreams or flights of imagination. Why then should it not be capable of existing independently of the body? If the mind as a soul is merely a temporary tenant in a mortal body, why should it not be capable of reincarnation in other bodies? The immaterial mind cannot be seen and it cannot be touched, which suggests it emanates from a different order of reality than the world of objects you experience around you. Why then should there not be a transcendent realm where it is most at home? Why should it not be capable of ascension to these higher realms of existence after the death of the body? As an intelligent, self-aware being, the fact that you have this extraordinary capability for thought seems to lend your existence a profound significance that no other animal enjoys, and so consciousness can surely only be a gift of a divine intelligence, right? So yeah, it's easy to see how we fall for the soul fiction, as Nietzsche calls it. In Christianity, the West's dominant cultural tradition, the soul has always enjoyed exalted status. It is believed to be a thing of eternal, indivisible spiritual substance. It's absolutely unique, but also equal before God with every other soul. In contrast, the body, at least when Christianity was at the height of its power, was reviled as filthy, bestial and profane, being an object of changeable base matter and therefore furthest from the purely spiritual realm of God and his angels. This attitude to the body is well illustrated by the 16th century Spanish Catholic saint Ignatius of Loyola. Quote, "Let me look at the foulness and ugliness of my body. Let me see myself as an ulcerous sore running with every horrible and disgusting poison." Unquote. For Nietzsche, this intense disdain for the body was an appalling side effect stemming from an excessive veneration of the non-material soul. He went so far as to claim that, quote, "Christianity, which despised the body, has been the greatest disaster for humanity so far." Unquote. That's from Twilight of the Idols. Christian bodily denigration has inspired some spectacular self-neglect and self-abuse over its 2,000-year history. In the Dark Ages, simple care of the body, such as washing and bathing, was condemned as sinful vanity. In the Antichrist, Nietzsche refers to the Catholic recapture of Spain from the Muslim Moors in the 15th and 16th centuries when he writes that, in Christianity, quote, "Hygiene is rejected as sensuousness. The Church defends itself even against cleanliness. The first Christian edict following the expulsion of the Moors was the closure of the public baths. There were some 270 in Cordoba alone." Unquote. Suspicious of any kind of basic bodily care, the medieval church also frowned on any concern to meet the necessities of general well-being. Voluntary poverty was praised as a virtue. Arduous fasting, long vigils of prayer, and other such penitential ordeals were encouraged. Pilgrims would make long journeys to sites of spiritual importance, often perilous itself in an age of widespread banditry. The especially zealous might even walk the whole distance on their knees to demonstrate their piety through the intensification of their suffering. Because Jesus had claimed that his kingdom was not of this world, people abandoned their families and abandoned their communities in order to remove themselves from the wickedness of temporal, real-world existence. They became monks, nuns, hermits, ascetic anchorites. A handful of remarkable individuals even had themselves walled up for life in tiny stone cells adjoining churches where they could live out their days in prayer. A small aperture was their only access to the outside world, and that allowed food and water to be passed in and waste products to be passed out. Others retired to the solitude of the wilderness. A really notable case is the 4th century hermit, St. Simeon Stylites, who lived from 390 to 459 BC. He lived on top of a single column, exposed to all the elements for 37 years, and in one account he ate only boiled vegetables until his skin began to crack, after which he agreed to dress his meagre dinner with a little olive oil. Nietzsche wonders whether such radicals, fleeing to the cloister, the cave, and the desert, were driven not so much by love of God as by fear of life. The world-denying, world-decrying religionists are, for him, the original nihilists. Another favoured mania for religious ascetics was systematically starving themselves and, with contempt for any kind of comfort, wearing only sackcloth or coarse hair shirts. They would sleep on freezing floors and scourge themselves with whips. Devices were manufactured, such as belts with inward-facing spikes that could be worn under clothing to keep the wearer in constant pain. These masochistic practices, purportedly in emulation of Christ's suffering, were intended to edify the soul through the mortification of the flesh. Thanks to our old friend St. Augustine, the Church taught that all human beings were party to the inborn guilt of original sin inherited from Adam and Eve, and so such deprivations were well-deserved punishments, as well as spiritually elevating disciplines. An especially distasteful case of the pursuit of absolute self-abnegation is furnished by the 16th century Carmelite nun Maria Maddalena di Pazzi, who is said to have licked the putrefying wounds of lepers. As might be expected, the Catholic Church sainted her for these extraordinary degradations. Here was precisely the sort of perverse example they could commend to their flocks. Will to Joy is a new and tender green shoot striving towards the light. It's going to thrive. It needs the sunshine and gentle rain of your support. If you find value here, support Will to Joy by doing a few simple things. Hit follow so you don't miss the next episode. Follow us on all the major social media platforms. Drop us a review. We'd love to hear your feedback. If you know people who get something from this podcast, please do share it with them. And if you can support us for a few dollars a month, please do so. Link in the show's description. And if you feel ready for it, you can now also become a De Profundis member on Patreon, with exclusive episodes that delve deeper into Nietzsche's philosophy for life. Link also in the show's description. Your support really does make a difference, and it will help ensure that Will to Joy can keep supporting you in your own flourishing. Nietzsche is infamous for his repudiation of Christianity. As is often the case, things are a little more complicated than they might first appear, but it's absolutely the case that Nietzsche had nothing but contempt for the Christian denigration of the body. Quote, "Imagine how much we can despise a religion that teaches a misunderstanding of the body, that does not want to escape from the superstition of the soul, that makes a merit out of poor nutrition, that fights health as a type of enemy, devil, temptation. that talks itself into believing that people can carry around a perfect soul in a cadaverous body. Unquote. That's Antichrist 51. The Church's absolute revulsion towards the body is recounted by Nietzsche when he cites the colourful epistle of Pope Innocent III, issued in the year 1201 and known as Virgentis Insignium. This is from Genealogy of Morals, Book 2, Section 7. Quote, "Man has bred for himself that upset stomach and coated tongue, through which not only have the joy and innocence of the animal become repulsive, but life itself has become unsavoury, so that he, at times, stands before himself, holding his nose, and along with Pope Innocent III, disapprovingly catalogues his repulsive traits." And here Nietzsche quotes Pope Innocent III. "Impure begetting, disgusting nourishment in the womb, vileness of the matter out of which man develops, revolting stench, excretion of saliva, urine, and feces." Unquote. The Church condemned natural human appetites as sinful temptations, which were orchestrated, of course, by that bogeyman, the devil. Sex, especially, being inescapably physical, was denounced as a foul ritual. Its only tolerable function was to permit procreation. The Church's distaste for the body and its natural impulses, especially sex, is encapsulated in the formula, "If thine eye offendeth thee, pluck it out." And Nietzsche laments that, quote, "the Church combats passion by means of excision of all kinds. Its practice, its remedy is castration. In all ages it has laid the weight of discipline in the process of extirpation. But to attack the passions at their roots means attacking life itself at its source. The method of the Church is hostile to life." Unquote. And that's from Nietzsche's notes. This reference to castration is not just a metaphor. Tradition has it that the 3rd century church father Origen castrated himself so he would not be tempted by the sins of the flesh. And an early Christian sect called the Valesians practiced self-castration as a prophylactic against lustful acts. It's even been reported that the Valesians would forcibly castrate unfortunate visitors and hapless travellers that stumbled across their path. In more recent history, and with verifiable records, including photographs, a sizable Russian Christian sect called the Skopsi practiced removal of the penis and testicles for men and removal of the breasts, clitoris and labia for women, sometimes with red-hot irons, and always without anaesthetic. The reproductive organs were believed by the Skopsis to be impure, the mark of Cain, and the original forbidden fruits. The Skopsi doctrine maintained that it was sexual coitus that had actually caused Adam and Eve to be expelled from the Garden of Eden. To become sexless was to return to the pristine pre-fall state. The Skopsi cited Matthew 19:12 as justification. Quote, "For there are some eunuchs which were so born from their mother's womb, and there are some eunuchs which were made eunuchs of men, and there be eunuchs which have made themselves eunuchs for the kingdom of heaven's sake. He that is able to receive it, let him receive it." Unquote. Most theologians have interpreted the term eunuch here as merely a euphemism for celibacy. The Skopsi were not prepared to take any chances. We'll have much more to say about Nietzsche's healthier, more pagan view of sex later, but the general tenor of his position can be gleaned from his repudiation of the Christian account of the virgin birth, that through its dogma of the Immaculate Conception, Christianity has robbed conception of its immaculateness. In his view, the Church actively set out to make people feel as sinful as possible, and it did this by, quote, labelling the unavoidably natural as bad, unquote. That's Genealogy of Morals 141. This notion is worth some consideration. To feel that your sexual impulses are disgusting when your sexual impulses are an utterly inalienable part of your nature, well, what kind of fiendish, cynical trap is this? One might as well make it a sin to make a bowel movement. Imagine a dog owner who punished his dog every time it needed to do its business. You'd consider it a particularly perverse form of cruelty and maybe even call in the authorities. In Nietzsche's view, this is essentially what the church did, and it did it because it was only by making the individual feel irredeemably sinful that they could be brought under the power of the church. For only the church had the power to absolve and mitigate these inalienable sins. For some medieval Christian theologians, matter itself was evil, and so the body, being matter, was evil too. The logical endpoint for such a culture of profound self-loathing was a fervent yearning for extinction. Martyrdom to the faith was glorified and provided the principal morally legitimate means for shedding the detestable body. Many a religious devotee went joyfully to their execution when just a few words of renunciation could have saved their lives. Reportedly, the condemned sometimes sang hymns, even as the torturer practiced his arts, or the flames began licking their skin. For the faithful in the early Roman Empire, as well as in later centuries when proselytizing to the heathens, martyrdom was an occupational hazard, and perhaps also a career opportunity. The church routinely canonized these martyrs for their troubles, thereby seeding a general eagerness to make the ultimate sacrifice. Nietzsche argued that, in fact, Christianity virtually promoted suicide in two forms and, quote, invested them with the highest dignity and the highest hopes, martyrdom and the slow self-annihilation of the ascetic, unquote. And that's from Joyous Science 131, slightly abridged. But it was not just the Christians. Half a world away, Eastern mystics would neglect, torture and extinguish themselves as a religious observance. Even the Buddha renounced all his possessions, embraced privation and starved himself almost to death. For Nietzsche, quote, wherever the doctrine of pure spirituality has prevailed, it taught that the body should be despised, neglected or tormented, and that, on account of his impulses, man himself should be tortured and regarded with contempt, unquote. That's from Dawn 39. It's for all these reasons that Nietzsche asks, quote, could any aberration be more dangerous than the contempt of the body, unquote. And that's from Will to Power 1016. Before continuing, music. Nietzsche is the philosopher of music, of dancing, of art, of the aesthetic, and of feeling. So I recommend a track every week that reflects the moods and emotions of this Will to Joy project, at least as I experience them. I invite you to have your own feeling experience framed within the project we're exploring while listening to Misdirection by Darkrooms. This track obsessed me for a little bit. Generally I get up early before it gets light and I do a little writing while I drink some coffee. This early rising is not a personal discipline, by the way, it's just my body clock. Anyway, I listened to this track a few times in the early hours and it happened to become associated with a breakthrough I had regarding the nature of Nietzsche's Dionysus. That has stuck with me and I get an intuition of it every time I hear the song. The song itself has an overwhelming climactic feel, especially towards the end, and there's some really intense, emotive singing. For me, the track evokes things like nighttime, drama, pain, intense longing, light in darkness, a sort of sweet desperation, and a kind of power and a kind of thrill. Anyway, see what it does for you. Links, as always, in the show's description. Do share your thoughts. I know somebody's going to one of these days, and you can message me right from the link in the show's description. Returning to Christianity's war on the body. As with the last show, once again, I might be accused of overstating things here, bit of self-indulgence perhaps, mea culpa. Certainly the vignettes I've been describing are the extremes of Christian practice, and a more balanced assessment could be made. I concede that this may be true, But the point of Nietzsche's critique is that this is where the Christian cult inevitably tends, its logical endpoint. This is Christianity in its hidden yet implicit meaning, that the body and its natural appetites and the world of which it is a part are detestable, and it sets up against them fictions, the nonsense of a pristine transcendental soul and the absurdity of a perfect afterworld, heaven. Consider Christianity's symbol, so revealing and yet something to which we are so inured that its horrifying import is completely overlooked. An emaciated corpse, the victim of an ignominious torture execution, nailed to a cross. Isn't Nietzsche right? Isn't this the perverse consecration of psychological ill health? So what's the lesson here? Well, that your body isn't something secondary or unimportant. It is, in every sense, the real you. You don't live in your body. That's a mistake. You are your body. And so care of the body, reverence for it, and reverence for all its impulses is a healthy orientation. As that pervert and junkie Sigmund Freud wrote, anatomy is destiny. And even he was right some of the time. Freud was really only thinking about sex differences when he coined this snappy maxim. Nietzsche thinks the ramifications of the facts of anatomy go much further than this. Why is anatomy destiny then? Anatomy is destiny because your body entirely determines your life experience. To put that in Nietzsche's terms, your physiopsychology, along with the facts of the environment in which you find yourself, provides a complete naturalistic explanation for all your behaviour and all your experiences. Skeptical? Well, join me next time when I will provide compelling proof that Nietzsche was absolutely right. Your body is your destiny. In the meantime, a simple practice for you. But before we explore the practice, a notice on the De Profundis membership on Patreon. I established that recently for those who want to go farther, deeper, faster into this strange world of Nietzschean philosophy and reap its life-changing rewards. So there on Patreon right now, waiting for the intrepid, is an exclusive podcast recording on the topic of master psychology and slave psychology as it manifests itself in the modern human being. In Beyond Good and Evil 212, Nietzsche asks, is greatness possible today? Well, the foundation for greatness is to be master of oneself, to have an internal locus of authority, to decide for yourself, to have your own taste, your own rules, a vanishingly rare phenomenon. How rare? Well, sign up and find out. It's $10 a month, which honestly I think is a pittance for the value that's on offer, and it just can't remain so inexpensive forever. But early adopters will benefit, and early adopters will have my gratitude, and so I'll extend special privileges to my first few members over time as this project progresses, and it will progress. That's something I no longer have any choice in. So as well as this exclusive show on the possibility of self-mastery, I'm providing not one, but 3 practices that will aid the development of self-mastery. There's a practice called Via Dolorosa, which is Latin for the way of sorrow. That probably doesn't sound too tempting, but trust me, I can guarantee that you'll never have experienced anything like this exercise in your life. There's also an exercise called Beck and Call, and I'll let you use your imagination about that one. And then there's a challenge called simply The Madman. I'm also going to set up a Discord group for Patreon members at some point where ideas can be exchanged and I can field any questions myself. And I'm going to post something for the De Profundis members at least every month, including perhaps some of my own reflections on my experiences and progress with the practices from this program. If you're intrigued by this, I suggest you sign up. Details, as always, are in the show's description. Dare to stare into this abyss, and of course be ready for it to stare into you. And so to the practice. Quote, The past continues to flow through us in 100 channels. Unquote. That's Human All Too Human, Part 2, Section 223. In its physiopsychology, your body is a remnant, a testament, a culmination, and a waypoint. The human body confides, speaking of the distant past, from whence it came, and yielding clues as to whither it will go. Take some time now to discern the body's history written into its flesh. Barefoot, in a quiet and private space, seat yourself. Outdoors is best. Breathe, relax, and make a careful study of your hands. Note their complexity of form, their dexterousness, their acute sensitivity to touch, pressure, texture, and temperature. See how purposefulness itself seems to be designed in. Those hands are intentionality made corporeal. Such versatility, adept at grabbing, holding, throwing, squeezing, pushing, prying, pulling, picking, pinching, poking, stroking, crushing, crafting, catching, tickling, manipulating, scratching, exploring, and not least for striking. Yes, these are weapons as well as tools. It's important that you do not hurry this examination. Reflect deeply on the millions of years that had to elapse for this precise morphology to develop, for the human hand to be shaped, a process of trial and error, billions of prototypes discarded on the way to this very particular design. Your hand is as perfect a tool for facilitating the natural activities of human life as you could hope for. Can you even imagine how the human hand could be improved? What a wonderful piece of biological engineering. Now, turn your attention to your feet. Compare them with your hands. Note the relative lack of dexterity in your feet. They seem rather lumpen and clumsy by comparison. Their functionality is considerably limited by comparison. And yet, consider that, in the remotest past, amongst your genetic ancestors, the foot had been much more like a primitive hand, almost indistinguishable from one in fact. Our most ancient forebears, ancestors we share in common with chimpanzees, spent most of their lives in the trees. In that acutely three-dimensional world, grasping feet were inordinately useful, not to say essential. It is only when they ventured down from the trees and adopted a more terrestrial existence, living on a two-dimensional plane, that the foot embarked on its metamorphosis towards the anatomical form you are now inspecting. A new bipedal lifestyle necessitating different physiological solutions, an appendage reshaped for new functions, walking and running. With this reflection on the foot's history of development, its transition from grasping, dexterous hand to its current form, static, stunted, apparently stupid, slab-like, somewhat atrophied, see how utterly malformed that hand has become. Imagine those cloddish feet at the end of your wrists. How impossible life would be. On this view, the foot is a monstrous travesty of a hand. See it. See the deformity of this hand. After a few minutes, adjust your view and adopt a different perspective. See the foot's adaptation to a new way of life and a new set of tasks. In place of its old clutching functions, it now perfectly fulfills other duties, supporting the body, providing a firm, dependable foundation, working in concert with the body to enable stability, balance, shock absorption, agility, and speed. Over unimaginable tracts of time, the bones, joints, and tendons of the foot have rearranged themselves. The skin on the soles has thickened to protect the vulnerable flesh beneath. This painstaking process of re-engineering has been underway for thousands upon thousands of generations to reach this remarkable and beautiful form. It is not finished yet. Nothing is ever finished. a radical anatomical transformation to meet changing conditions of survival and flourishing. What breathtaking genius is this? To conclude, we've seen that the traditional notion of the soul, this supposedly immaterial, eternal essence, collapses under Nietzsche's naturalistic scrutiny. Once stripped of all attributes, it vanishes like smoke. In its place stands the body, your living, evolving, utterly worldly body. It's the true locus of your identity, your experience, your thoughts, your passions, and your power. Nietzsche's challenge is radical. Abandon the fiction of the soul, and with it, abandon the toxic legacy of self-hatred that has haunted Western culture for millennia. What he offers instead is not just a critique, but a reorientation, a reverence for the body, a vindication of its instincts, and a deeper understanding of how our physiology speaks history, purpose, and possibility. Your body is not your prison, it is your potential. And far from being sinful, its impulses are the very stuff of life itself. As we continue this exploration, we'll see that to affirm the body is to affirm life, and that this affirmation is the precondition of strength, of freedom, of power, and of joy.